the show. Last couple of weeks we've been having very interesting personalities on the show, ranging from entertainers down to musicians. Everybody's been here. Today someone more interesting than interesting. Shirley Gunn is here. She's got a huge history within the political landscape of South Africa as an activist and still doing lots of work within society today. Shirley, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, I looked at your biography this morning, just making sure that I have it all in order. And I noticed there's a history that is very difficult for me to actually roll off on screen because it's a very long story and it starts many years ago with your activism on different levels. Where did it all start and who is Shirley behind the scenes?
Well, I'm the last of 5 of the Gunn family, born in Cape Town, grew up here. Medical family.
Yes, father was a doctor, mother was a
Yeah.
nurse.
Medical family, and my grandfather was a doctor, and my brother is a doctor. So there was a lot of medicine around my environment, and it was kind of, I think, a preordained destiny that I would go in following that direction. And in fact, after school, I nursed for a couple of years, and it became clear to me that the sick needed to be cared for, and that the sick were not agents of change necessarily. So because they were sick, they needed to be cared for. So I changed directions, and I studied social science at UCT, and it was a 4-year degree with social work, and my focus was on community social work rather than group work or counselling.
There's a component that I think the medical side is one component, and then there's another component that comes through on your side looking at your biography, and that's there's a little story of when you went out with your mom to a township or something like that. Was that the defining moment where you found yourself leaning towards the caring for society?
Well, I don't know. I think the one thing I can be grateful for is that I was spared a Christian national education. I went to a church school, a convent, from the age of 5 to the age of 17, 18. I was at one school. And I think the values embodied in that school were pro-poor, and I'm very grateful that I didn't get the dogma and propaganda that was forced down the throats of people attending government schools, be they white, coloured, Indian, or African, black. So I was fortunate in that respect, and my mother was a nurse, and in primary school I begged her to go on these visits that she had to do on Fridays, and basically she was her role was to follow up why people were not coming back to hospital, to Groote Schuur, for their chemotherapy. And I mean, that took me to every little corner of the Western Cape, the poorest pockets. And it was absolutely evident that the problem that health sector was facing was that ill health was poverty related.
But you're seeing all of this now. I think there's 2 types of people on the planet, in my view. And there's people that do a job, and they're just doing their job, and they move on, no matter what they're working with. And then I see someone like you that it seems like you've taken all of that in and philosophically decided something needs to be done, or this is not right, or change needs to come. So there's people that do their job, and there's people that does a job. And that's where I kind of see you you
I
sitting?
think there were layers to my understanding what was happening in society around me that I had sent chills down my spine. I found it unacceptable, unfair, and that I couldn't live with. And I saw these things as a child. I lived in Kenilworth, very close by. My friends in the neighbourhood were forced out due to the Group Areas Act. So, you know, I was touched by the laws that weren't designed to touch me. And, you know, I think one always has to, when in reflecting on one's life, one always looks at the moments, the people, the events that really shaped you. And it was a continuous process, I think. When I left school, the testimonial of the Mother Superior at the convent had said Shirley shows empathy beyond her years. And it didn't make any sense to me at that time.
Correct, yeah.
And it did later. But I think I can be grateful for that early education I received, the exposure from my parents, which wasn't necessarily political, but I saw things with my own two eyes. And then I started taking some certain decisions. And so I left nursing and I started as a student at UCT. I wasn't involved in the politics on campus because the course that I did took me off campus. So I worked in Kensington and Bonteheuwel and Retreat and Hout Bay Harbour in my fourth year.
But it's Hout Bay Harbour where the ANC thing started.
Yes. So in the very early 80s, I was recruited into working in the political underground, and I met with contacts in Zimbabwe, the ANC, and I was actually quite surprised, you know, because I was so willing at that time, in my early 20s, to actually be part of the armed wing of the ANC. And
which is interesting because I'm trying to picture, going back in time, a young white female getting involved on that level of things, which is difficult to picture for me now sitting in 2015. Your parents and the people around you, what were their thoughts at that time? They obviously saw you getting all involved there.
well, it's you know, you don't talk to your parents about it.
So you were totally underground?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
So, you know, absolutely, you don't talk to anyone. And shame. I remember my dad, who was a doctor, a radiologist, and they were thinking about setting up a practice in Elsie's River, and he wanted my opinion. This must have been about in '83. And he sat me down in his study and he asked me, what do I think? And then I said, do you really want to know? He said, that's why I've asked you the question. So, you know, I'd already been influenced by my experience in hospitals, of the health sector, of the problems, and I gave him a very honest answer that, in fact, health shouldn't be in the hands of private practice. It should be state-owned, and it should be accessible to all.
What was his response to that?
He asked me if I was a communist.
Oh, interesting.
Well, I got a bit of a shock.
Yes.
So, you know, if you are a communist, if you're not a communist, you don't say yes. So I said no. I'm a socialist.
Yes.
So it was his response took me by surprise. And then about in '84, he was speaking to somebody on the phone. He died in '84. Early '84, he was speaking to somebody on the phone, and he was going a rundown, who's this, how's that one, and the next one, and then, oh, how am I? Clearly he was speaking about me. Oh, she's fine, she's not in the hands of the security police. So I think as his great interest was military history. He was a scholar in history. And so I think he feared. He had a sense of what was going to go down one day. And that wasn't because I had a conversation with him, but he had a sense because he was intelligent.
Correct.
Well, he died before I was actually incarcerated.
Yes.
Because my first stint in detention was in 1985.
Yes, correct. So that happens just after that. When was it that people started noticing Shirley Gunn? I'm referring to the security police, because you could be operating underground doing all kinds of things. I know that they have the intelligence everywhere, that's another matter. But when was it that you were in, and you were totally in, which meant there's no coming out, but going with this now?
Well, you see, the security police were aware of people who were able to mobilize and organize. And I was boots in, boots and all, into the mass democratic struggle. And that took a certain amount of risk, and you stick out. So I had the security branch on my tail from quite early, and it meant that, in fact, I had to learn intelligence and counterintelligence on my feet, to duck and dive, and to avoid arrest and to avoid compromising anyone else.
How did you feel at the time? I mean, today how you feel is one thing, but just getting into it and getting into that level of activism, which is a high level of activism, how did you feel? Was there fear, or something would happen to me, I could be kidnapped, never to return, something? Did any of these cross your mind at all?
Yes, I think every day was a life and death situation, quite frankly. So whether I was in the mass democratic struggle, whether I was doing political underground work, whether I was doing military underground work, my fear level was pretty much the same. And it's something you learn to live with, actually. You know, I became very aware of how I was breathing, for example, and you stop breathing. Fear causes you to stop breathing.
Correct.
And so, I mean, I was aware of my physiology and the impact it was having on my body, and my state of tension and hyper alertness, and the way I suppressed fear.
Where was your mom at this time? What was her thinking?
My mom was very worried because I wasn't a good daughter in the sense of being a support to her.
So you're not the girl in the house doing the washing and the cooking kind of thing?
No, I moved out when I was quite young,
Okay, so
actually.
you were out there, your career was going, and at the same time you were an activist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think she just wanted a normal relationship with me. Like, she kept on saying, don't bring in the politics, don't talk about these things to me, I'm not interested. And I, of course, I had to navigate what I could speak about and what I couldn't, and what I could speak to her was very tame and mild, in fact. But she didn't want any of that. She just wanted a normal relationship. But then my mom, over time, then when I popped in, she would ask me questions, and I could see that she was actually thinking quite deeply about some of the current political questions, what was going on. So she started picking up a conversation with me, a political conversation over time. And after a while, it came a little later, I realized that as a daughter, I'm not the best one to educate my mom, to bring her into the fold, to support her. So there were a couple of steps that didn't work so well, but eventually Rahmat Jaffer, Zubaida's mother,
Yes.
was extraordinary and took my mother under her wing. I said, please look after my mom. And she did. My mom was staying in Kenilworth, Rahmat was in Wynberg, and the women in Wynberg gave my mom a lot of support. And that was the best thing I could have done, actually. Because it's not often the younger generation that can conscientize an older generation. There's a stubbornness and there's sort of doors that you can't open. But the same generation is a little bit easier and more palatable. And this is a group of really militant women.
Correct, yes. So who was your support base? Because when one ventures out into anything in life, and especially something of this nature which many people don't have an experience with, it's a very limited field of scope that you'd be working in as an activist on that level. Somebody and some people needed to support you. Someone that you'd be going to and saying, you know what, you're doing the right thing. Just continue doing what you're doing. Because now your father is gone. Mother is a bit not sure about things. Who was it that was standing behind you saying, just continue, Shirley, do what you do?
Well, we were a small group of activists, very close actually. I stayed in Belgravia Road in the same house as Johnny Issel. Zubaydah lived there too, and there were a number of other activists in and out of that house. And I would say that Johnny Issel was a very strong mentor in my life. We thought alike, we could think on our feet. I had an abundance of energy. He was banned, I wasn't at that time. In fact, I've never been banned. And so it was a good relationship, a strong relationship, political relationship. And we had, we were, at the time, it was a strange kind of Isselite. Do you remember that? I don't know if you do. People that were close to Johnny were actually labeled Isselites. And, but, they're always along the way, they're our closer comrades. And I think the relationships that are forged under those really difficult conditions are lifelong. And it's not something that you can take for granted. You need to work at it, and I'm not very good at that. I don't have much of a social life because I work as hard as I do. And I think that's a little bit of a lonely journey.
Correct, yes.
But I've learned to live with that, and I'd spent a lot of my time on any free time that I might have. I don't mind being on my own, actually.
So there comes this big event, the bombing. And you're accused of the bombing. How did you take to that?
Well, you see, that was...
you were involved with similar matters around, yes, deeper down. So was it easy for the security police to point that finger at you saying, she's part of the bombing?
Well, you see, I'm still trying to figure it out. It's a complex and murky history. But as history is, it's not black and white, it's quite grey.
Adrian Flock was involved there, am I right?
He certainly was.
Yes.
So let me just move on from firstly being involved in the political underground. I then became in 1984, early 85, involved in the military underground.
Yes. Okay, so that's where the finger point could have happened.
And so, I was trained inside the country, and
you were married at the time already?
No.
No, you were not married.
Then in 85, I served 113 days in solitary confinement at Paulsmoor. Nelson Mandela and the other Rivonia trialists were there at the same time.
But that was solitary?
That was solitary.
But before you go on, how did you cope in that? Because, we hear the term solitary confinement, but I must be honest with you, spending a night alone in my room at night, that's kind of enough. I'd want to come out the next morning. How do you feel?
Well,
what do you do?
Well, the first thing you have to do is that the law at the time enabled the security police to detain you for 180 days. So you've got to go in with a mentality that you are staying there for 180 days because you're not going to cooperate with the security police. So you don't live from day to day, oh, when am I going to get out? You go backwards, 180, 179, 178. I've got a long way to go.
But what do you actually do? Like, do you...
Well, you get interrogated.
Yeah, I know you were tortured and interrogated all the time, but apart from that, I mean, just sitting in solitary confinement is like, I can't...
Well, you're in a single cell,
yes.
And I used to imagine the kind of questions from one session to the next, what I might be asked, and prepare my answers. So I went through a mental process, and then I would say, stop and don't do that. And think about any other thought that you can possibly conceive of. Look, I wanted a Quran. I was madly in love with Anis Ali at the time, and I did not want the Bible. Yes. I wanted a Quran so I could study it. And they refused it. They wouldn't give it to me. So eventually I realized, okay, now you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. I've never read the Bible from cover to cover. Let me get the book. And I did. I read it. I read it. I read it and I read it. I read some sections many times, actually. And
was this giving you some type of solace?
Well, to some extent, I saw that the story, I could relate to some aspects of both the Old Testament and the New Testament, and it did, absolutely. And I can't particularly pick on any sections, but I think it's a story about a man on the run and who was persecuted. And I was in the same position. So I got a lot of strength from that. And eventually he died. Okay, he rose from the dead. That's a bit supernatural. And I'm not a supernaturalist. So that was a little bit far-fetched in my imagination. But there were aspects of the story that I related to, and it's gruesome, actually. There's so much violence in the Bible. It was almost like living through our times. Anyway.
Obviously the correlation was there with regards to the oppression
yes.
that a person was undergoing. And here you are in modern day at that time, experiencing oppression.
And persecution for my views.
But by the rulers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I could draw that parallel and strength from it, definitely. Anyway, so I read the Bible. I knew that every 2 weeks, every 14 days, I had to have a visit from the inspector of detainees. I knew that I had rights every 14 days to the doctor, who would ask me, have I been tortured?
Was it a rhetorical question, or?
Yes, it was.
Because he obviously knew you're getting tortured.
Don't ask me those stupid questions. You know, really, sit down. Talk to me. I haven't seen anyone else besides the security police. You're a doctor. Sit down. Take a seat on my toilet pot. Tell me about the weather. And he was very sweet. He was a Jewish doctor. And then at one point he said, tell me, was your grandfather Dr. Gunn, Professor Gunn? I said, yes. Oh. And so he kind of, and your father was Ken Gunn? Yes. So all of a sudden, this is a little bit close to him, you know.
Coming along there.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. So I knew I had those contact visits, and they were very brief, and otherwise it was just the security police, and it was the wardens at the prison.
Torture in this time, what did it entail? I know there was an incident with you and them playing, I think this was a later incarceration of another 60 odd days or something, where they played clips of your son crying to you. And
that was a later one. So in 85, I think, you know, it was really an adjustment to living in a confined space. My body actually, you go into complete spasm because you're not exercising, and there's a certain amount that you can do in a cell, in a single cell. And you've got half an hour exercise in the yard. And when I started running around like a crazy thing, I was asked, where did you train? So I stopped doing that. And you've got to manage your mind, basically. And I realized very soon into my stint in 85 that the last thing anyone should do in solitary confinement was fast.
Fast?
Because you have to stay strong.
Of course, yes.
And so I complained about the food, and I left samples on a plate for the doctor, and I asked him, "What do you think this is? Any idea?" And he said, "Okay, you put me on a fat-free diet." It was like glycerine fat on the plate, just a blob of white fat with white cabbage and white samp. So it was a plate, you've just got to swallow it because you've got to stay strong. That was my mentality. So I think those are the tips that I have for anyone who ever gets into that situation.
But was your treatment in any way different in prison? Not from a favor point of view, but from a point of view that here's this girl from the white community sitting there, and she's an anti-apartheid activist. Yes, right, but she comes from us. And you sort of with all these other sort of more black colored people. Was it different treatment to you, or were they treating you just as bad as everybody else?
I think maybe even worse in a sense, because, you know, they see you as an ultimate traitor. You're a white person and you have the advantages of a white person in our society, yes, and yet you're doing all of this stuff. And no, I don't think it. I think there was absolute venom and hatred in this by the security branch, and they would have really liked to have put me behind bars for a long time. That's what they threatened all the time. They were very aware that I could have been involved in the Communist Party. They were pretty clear that I could have been involved in MK. They were very clear that I definitely was part of the underground political movement, not from what I said, and I didn't say anything. At one time, huh?
How did they try and get info?
Well, they are constantly asking you questions and tripping you up. But you are clever in the sense that you've thought about what could come up and how you would let them off the scent. So you take them down another road. It's all about decoy and...
Do you really have to keep your mind about all of this?
Absolutely. Super, super, super vigilant. So it ended up that I was released on charges of Communist Party literature, that Dalla Omar got me off.
That's what I was going to ask you, was Dalla Omar got you off on that? He was then obviously a practicing lawyer at the time.
Yes.
He
was the greatest man, honestly. He was a great, great First Minister of Justice. I miss him sorely. So he defended me and he got me off those charges.
So you're back out on the road now. Obviously being an activist remains an activist.
Still with the security police behind me,
yes,
wherever I went.
So what happens then?
So then I prepared for an exit. And I went slowly, slowly, slowly under, completely disguised.
Is this the exile point to Botswana?
Yes, right. That's right. So I worked for the trade union movement, organizing clothing workers. Amazing woman, wonderful experience. It was tough going. The Communist Party is banned, all political structures are banned, and you've got to fill this all in, all these pieces. You've got to play this role. You've got to do so much teaching, and it's not easy to have open conversations at a gate with a crowd of people. So I'd have certain kind of meetings outside, and then I would say, I'm prepared to visit anyone in their houses. Just give me your address, and I would get these pieces of paper, and I would organize my program. Every single night I went to Beacon Valley or the depths of Clark's Estate or Atlantis or God knows where, to follow up with these workers and have smaller meetings with them. Sign them up, sign them all up, slowly and methodically. And, you know, I'd come back to Belgravia.
I must admit, you're quite a strategist.
Yeah.
I suppose you have to be one.
It's a hard worker. I'm a hard worker. Yes. You know, it's not about you. It's not about putting your life. That has never been that important to me, actually. Eventually, you know, it became impossible for me to work in any legal capacity because of the way I was harassed by the security police. It was continuous. And then I left, I exited the country in 6 months after I was released from solitary confinement. And I stayed 1 year outside, had a mentality, I'm not here in exile, I'm in transit, I'm going back home. I'm not going to get stuck outside. And
but did it give you a bit of a break being outside? The pressure of the security police and all of that?
Yes, it did. Time to think as well. Time to take stock, re-strategize, gear myself up for the next leg, because I was going home. So I was sent to Cuba and studied military intelligence there. It was absolutely wonderful, and I have intentions of going back. I would like very much to go back at the end of this year, but it costs a lot of money. I have to figure that out. It was a wonderful experience in Cuba because of the license I had every single afternoon to go to a small community outside Havana and prepare for my practical. Now, the others in the course were not as interested in it as I was, and I was blown over by my experience in Cuba. And I every single day hoped and wished that the workers that I was working with in the clothing factories could experience Cuba. It gave me hope, real hope. There was no poverty, there was imagination in the housing, there was health for all, everyone was educated. There was, you know, nothing about school uniforms, just a little tie separated one school from the other, something simple. So if you moved schools, it wasn't a whole new uniform you had to buy. White shirt, shorts, socks, shoes, and a little kind of tie, small tie. And just it was wonderful, and I hoped that I could continue to create an environment in South Africa that could fight for that type of society.
Correct, yes. So we find that you've sort of gone that full circle, and you, along with many other people doing what they did, we come into an almost present day, and Mandela is standing there and he's being sworn in the inauguration.
You're jumping.
Yeah. So I just want to take you one step forward. Was that something that you thought you would really see, knowing that you're fighting for that? But did you ever believe that it would really happen?
Well, I think, you know, the first thing I need to say in the story, because you've asked me some detailed questions up to now, is that I did return a year later, and I was in the command structure of a detachment that was responsible for over 30 bomb blasts. And I'm proud of that. I wish I could have done more.
Now, but the bombing that they accused you of,
I didn't do.
So you were not on that one?
No.
Okay.
And I, in fact, I
so
was
why
pregnant with my son.
they kind of singled that one out, and that one was kind of all over the show.
January 1989, I'm in an underground house, about 8 months pregnant, and this comes up on the news. Jaber and the boys at some press conference in Johannesburg accusing a white woman going in with 40 kilograms of explosives into the South African Council of Churches basement, and it was a botched attempt, and it went off, and they were looking for me. I was seen entering there with 2 unknown coloured men.
That's interesting.
Interesting. It was a shock. I mean, it was hardly the thing I needed.
You're sitting and watching this. What do you do? I mean, it's like something out of a movie.
Absolutely, it was. Well, you know, we realized seriously this was, I just moved to this place in Constantia, actually. It was a stable, quite frankly. It was a renovated stable on the property of a lawyer. And I'd moved there pre to giving birth as a new base, and hadn't been there for long, a couple of weeks, when this news item came up. And so I had to evacuate immediately. I had to leave, and I think at the time that the NIS thought they were quite close to my tail, so they were creating a scenario where South Africa would be very happy if I came out of the building feet first, dead, so they could smash this detachment and all its operations with the assassination of somebody senior, if co-commanding. So, they failed. And from there it was a scurry, it was a rush, we moved and moved and moved. It was very tense. But we survived. And so, you know, Johnny met with Mandela, and he served on what we called a PMC, Political Military Committee. So we met from time to time, and we knew he was having a meeting with Mandela. We gave him some Communist Party literature to read, actually. And also we got a report back from him, which gave us a lot of hope, because we were nervous. Why does one person entertain these people? God, it's unthinkable.
Great.
You could be a sellout. This man is lost his mind. You don't do that to the movement. This is democracy, you know, in the wings, about to take the center stage, and there's one person who's negotiating with the enemy. So initially we had a lot of fear, I suppose, but that was laid aside after we got some of the report backs to what was happening in the consultations.
Yes. And getting a deeper understanding of what was going on there.
And we knew that we were actually, our freedom was closer than we had imagined and were prepared to sacrifice for. So, I mean, you know, the 80s, it was, you could smell it, our freedom was tangible. Although we had all these laws against us and all the forces against us, we had a lot on our side. We carried on despite the bannings, despite the state of emergencies and all its repressive legislation. It was phenomenal. So, you know, I think after so long in the underground, many of us were battle worn, I would say, and the bulk of, the last of the people in the detachment only surfaced in 1992 because we didn't know, and in fact we were told to stay combat ready because anything could have rolled back in that time. And as you know, there were attempts to roll back the progress we had made.
Correct, yes.
And so I think it was only, I don't know exactly the dates, but then Anis surfaced because he was serving in the underground with me, and because I never cooperated with the security police when I was even detained the second time in 1990 after the unbanning of the ANC. Asked me with tears in my eyes what they were up to. Again, it was a mistake. They had not intended to take me alive, but they didn't get their chance. I was trained in Cuba by the best, honestly. I had military intelligence. I outwitted them. I survived. Death.
Many that didn't, and you came out of that.
Yeah. So their orders to assassinate me failed, and had they been successful, then Adrian Vlok would never have had to go to the TRC.
Correct.
Because I sued him. I sued him when I could sue him, when somebody squealed among their forces that he had personally congratulated them at Vlakplaas for the operation at the SACC, the South African Council of Churches headquarters. So when that came to light, I knew I didn't do that. I knew they did it. Now I could actually sue them. So I had a hard case, actually, and Esamosa and Associates were my lawyers.
They paid you 70,000 for that one.
Yes, I reached an out-of-court settlement, but partly because I knew that Adrian Vlok and the others responsible for both the bombing of Khotsa House and Kusata House would have to go to the TRC.
But it wasn't about the suing for you. I'm feeling that it was about setting that record straight.
Well, you know, setting the record straight, but yes, it was defamation in the worst imaginable kind. My image was everywhere. So they painted the picture of this terrorist who is worthy of loss of life, and so you know you kind of expect that could happen. You don't expect to survive. Actually, you prepare to give your life. But there were ways in which we could take the assegai out of our backs and throw it back at them. Like throwing the tear gas back at them. That was what I was doing. Or maybe turning the purple dye nozzle back at them.
Yes.
So that was successful. It wasn't easy because, you know, it was for damages, so you've got a whole pathology, and the way in which Harun and I, my baby, were tortured was horrible. And but if you're having to go to court on the basis of defamation and wrongful arrest and damages, you've got to hold that. You've got to prove that this is how you've been affected. So I had to carry that pathology. It was really actually not pleasant.
Shirley, can I ask you a question? Coming back into today, do you carry some of that with you? The tortures, those incidences, or do you see it as those sacrifices is part of why South Africa today is democracy and people are free? Have you sort of given it to that component, or do you still feel sometimes that those bad people, look what they did to me?
Well, it's not really what they did to me as well, but I think, you see, I cooperated to the best of my ability with the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I sent the one person that needed to go, the head of law and order, Adrian Vlok,
Yes.
to the cleaners, but he didn't tell everything. He lied, in fact. And so
you're saying he sat at TRC and lied?
Well, he lied in that he didn't tell the full truth.
So it's a euphemistic approach that he's given them?
Yes, you know, and
Which is one way of lying?
yeah, you're not telling the whole truth, and that's the basis on which you get amnesty.
Correct, yes.
So, you know, there are little packages where he came, I'm sorry, I put poison in Frank Chikani's underpants and I framed her. I'm sorry for that. Speaking to the commissioners, not to us, me. You washed Frank Chikani's feet. I said, not on your life. You've got a long queue of people's feet to wash before you come to me. I'll be the last in the queue, I said. Because I don't think he's come clean. And he was ahead of the law and order at the time.
Was, yes.
So, you know, there's this thing of forgiveness that comes with our national reconciliation program. And I find that like a fishbone in my throat. It's stuck It's stuck. I don't easily think that I can forgive. It doesn't mean to say that I'm stuck or I'm revengeful or I'm angry or carry pathology, but I don't think that I can forgive, because I know so many people's truth has not come through the TRC, and it was a flawed process. It should have gone on for much longer. Many, many more thousands of people should have been giving their statements. Many, many more members of the security forces should have applied for amnesty. So
I want to ask you a question about that, and I don't want to digress on it, but and you may choose to answer the question or not. Someone like Adrian Vlak, do you believe that the TRC was a process that needed to be followed? It was a dictated process that needed to happen. But do you believe that such a process has actually changed the person within?
no, because it was so incomplete. And you know, very recently I read the foreword to the TRC's report, written by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and it's a short 25-page foreword, very easy to read, and therein lies the flaws, shame, because I mean, in one breath, with great good heart, the chairperson of the TRC acknowledges that a certain amount of truth has come out, acknowledges that after the TRC more truth will come out. But let us put it behind us. Let us move on in the interest of national unity and reconciliation. Let's put this past behind us. Well, for most people, it's not that easy, actually, because they haven't got the truths that they need to get on with their lives. So I have spent a lot of my time with a big organization that's growing all the time. It doesn't, not more and more members are adding their names and their membership to it, Kulamani Support Group, which means to speak out. And it's really made up, I think, of the bulk of mass democratic movement activists who contributed an enormous amount, have buckshot and bullets in their bodies, have dog bites and baton wounds and psychological scars and medical problems because of their role in the struggle. But they are not regarded, and they're not included in the TRC, yes. So they didn't get the package, and they don't get special pensions, and bloody. Yes.
Surely we know that law of science, that energy cannot be lost. It just gets dissipated into one form or another. And you're one of those people that has a serious amount of energy. And when I think about serious amounts of energy, I'm thinking of the kryptonite kind of people. They just keep going. And all that happens is you, through the processes now, take that energy and convert that into something else. And that's what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You're sitting as an executive director of an organization today that is doing work along human rights. Tell us a bit about that. Because you've now taken all of that and that's where you're putting it, because there's no more part of the struggle to go through.
Well, there is. I would beg to differ. You know, I am the only person living in my area that is white.
Oh, interesting.
Apartheid is alive and well geographically. We don't have the laws in place, but we are still segregated. So I think we've got a long way.
Before I said that, I knew you were going to say what you're saying.
Good.
Yeah, I just knew it. And I agree with you.
Yeah. So, you know, through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I experienced a great deal of interest in our narratives and our stories, and there were so many people who wanted their own bite, and they weren't prepared to deal with trauma, they weren't experienced with it. I said enough is enough after hundreds of interviews and assisting people with their PhDs and everything else, and realized that because stories are so important to shape and change public perception and consciousness, that's what I would work with. And so I started the Human Rights Media Centre, which is actually an oral history project. And so we've worked with, over the 15 years, we started in 2000, year 2000, and it's now 2015, 15 years ago. In this year, in this period, we've done a huge amount of art and memory work with the very forgotten people I mentioned, the mass democratic movement, people who are members of Kulamani, to share their stories in multimedia, very exciting. It's called Breaking the Silence, Aluta Continua. It's a big multimedia exhibition. It's traveled everywhere, quite a lot of places, can carry on traveling. I worked with refugees for the last 14 years, done a whole range of different work at different levels, interacted with government, with a Kulamani group, with Justice Department, with the Home Affairs, and I also work with disability and particularly albinism, because we focused on blindness and partial sightedness. Of course, this is a very, very important condition, very misunderstood, horrible myths around it, great discrimination. And so I've had a long journey with people with albinism. You notice I don't say albino.
Yes.
And it's a medical condition, it's genetically inherited, and it's manageable, and people should get disability grants, and they should be educated in mainstream schools. If the teachers understand how to remove the barriers to their learning, they should not be sent to schools for the blind and the deaf, where these myths can prevail endlessly. We need to learn to get to know each other.
Shirley, you've been giving back all your life, and I think it's an honor for me to interview someone like you, because it's such a long and winded history that is so rich, and the story is just so intense. And I don't think that an interview like this does justice to your story. Have you ever thought about the book?
Well, yes, this is, I think, the mother of all projects that I'm busy with at the moment, and thank you for the question. I was in the command structure of the Ashley Creel detachment, and we are telling the life stories of the 20 survivors. It's a very challenging project. A generation later, the militants are able to talk about their experiences. So they're long stories. It's a very big manuscript, over 800 pages in total at the moment, and it will be in a book. Now mine is part of that. I've had difficulty in conceptualizing a standalone story, although I've been encouraged to go in that direction. I'm very happy it's sitting with a book of others that I was part of, the detachment. And my story is one of the 4 long ones. It's 87 pages, still at a draft stage. So I would say, Faizal, next year we'll do a launch, and we better bring the camera there.
No, of course, we're going to follow you on that journey, and I would like to have you back in that time to talk about that publication. In conclusion, I know that it feels like we have shortcutted many things, but that's because your story is very intense, and it's really impossible to cover an entire story like yours in a 1-hour show or half an hour show. It's really impossible. And there's so much I still want to ask, but time has caught up with us. Just a message out there to the rest of South Africa, knowing that you are part of that life that they live today.
Well, I don't think it's time to hang up our gloves. I'm still an activist. It's changed, and it's humiliating having to rattle the gates of Parliament when the comrades that you fought alongside with are on the other side of the fence. But it's necessary, and it's necessary work. None of us who have taken this kind of journey, we are responsible for the political mess we're in today. We can't turn our back on it. We had ideals for which we fought, and we struggled, and we haven't arrived. So, as Mandela said, long walk to freedom, we're still on that walk. I encourage everyone to continue that walk.
Thank you, Shirley. Very profound words, Shirley Gunn, an activist of note. The story, a very interesting one. Watch out for that publication coming out soon. I'm going to have a bit of Shirley's biography on my website, faizalsaid.com, and I hope to have her soon back in the studio to discuss many other things which I haven't touched on. I was interested in the kids, the husband, the family, all those kind of things. Didn't even get there.
Yeah, quickly.
We're going back.
Yes, we're going back. We're going forward. You know, I think one does wonder about the intergenerational transmission of memory and trauma and how it affects young people and how it is to live in the shadow of stalwarts, if I may say, sometimes referred as that. Hani, born in 1993, after Chris Hani, but an Arabic surname, name, Hani,
Yes.
is studying history and international politics. She's clear and conscious and got her life ahead of her. Harun is an artist. He's got his solo exhibition coming up in Johannesburg next month, and he is working. Some of the work in this exhibition is around his namesake, the man, the Imam, after whom he's named, Imam Harun.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
There's so much that we still need to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But he's doing great work, and so is Hani, and I'm single, and I'm happy to be single and happy with my kids.
And that's Shirley. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.